said this before, but many could probably picture this. I grew up in McLean, which means had 6 sets of aunts and uncles within a 5-mile radius of my hometown. We all went to the same church. So if I got in trouble at church, it didn't matter if it was Aunt Mabel, Aunt Edith, Aunt Hulda, my mom, or Aunt Edna. If I was caught, I was caught. And caught was the same, right? That was real simple in a way to catch on. This is right, that's wrong. Right? Because everybody needs to have somebody between here and that big world out there to teach you how to live out there, not losing track of right or wrong. Okay? Now, some of us on the slide would get away with things and do things anyway and kind of push the edge there. But there's this whole host of people, whether it's in my home, at church, at school, downtown. When we would drive into Oswego, we'd park our car, you always hid your keys, either above the visor or under the floor mat. You remember those days? Yeah. You could have stolen any car on the block because the keys were in the car. That was a safe place to live. We don't live there anymore. I want to connect a couple dots for us. I'm sure you've heard this, but the fastest growing segment that is suiciding in our culture are elementary kids, younger kids. They're dying out there because they're growing up in a world that does not have the message that says, this is a safe world. You can learn to live in it. You can learn to live well. You can learn to live safely. You can learn to treat other people in a way it'll go well for you and for them. So between me, a child, and that big world out there was all these intermediaries who taught me, and they all taught me the same thing. Until back in the 70s, the liberal education began to transform the way we thought about this world. And part of that was teaching children at every level, we're really the product of evolution. You know what goes out when you really believe that? The basis of right or wrong. Now you may not believe that, this is the truth. Think with me. If there is no God, if there is no creator God who has established right and wrong and revealed it to mankind, then hey, is your opinion any better than mine? Where is the basis for establishing a good or a bad if there's no ethical value built into this world? The founders of our country said, looks to me like in every nation around the world, there is a remnant of law that's written on the hearts of men. So our country is based upon the rule of law because we said, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Self-evident. That God created all men equal and given them certain rights. We looked around the whole world, we said, this makes sense, we can see that. But if you shift to a perspective that we're just kind of evolved here, then the ability of one man to say my way is better than your way is based upon Darwin, not upon values. And so Hitler had a literary hero. Any of you know who Hitler's literary hero was? One of them was Darwin. So if it's true in the physical realm and in the natural realm that there's a survival of the fittest, if it applies in the natural realm, it also applies in the national realm. Let me say it again. If it applies in the natural realm, it applies in the national realm. And so since the Aryan race was supreme and others were less, then the survival of the fittest justified the Holocaust. There was a lady also named Margaret Sanger who thought she would like to exterminate a certain race, and so she started Planned Parenthood. Guess who her intellectual hero was also? Charles Darwin. Want to go down that road? We're already down it. We're already down the road in such a way that the younger people of our time, many of whom have grown up, even in church on a Sunday morning, have grown up with some of us demonstrating to them, church is Sunday morning, it's a good ritual, but when we leave here, a story told of a school had a little boy, and it just happened to be, the story was told about a man from India. And they called the dad and said, you know, your son is stealing things. He's stealing pencils. He's stealing papers. He's stealing this and stealing that. And says, I don't know why he's doing that. He says, I can bring all that stuff home from work. And he got it. He had trained his son to be just like him. Now, when we don't realize how far we have drifted, we'll not likely be able to step back across the line again. But all of life is about coming to know where God's path is and staying on His side. All of life. I don't care what it is that happens to us. Somewhere in the middle of that is God saying, I want you to pray like this. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And aligning ourselves with that, that's our journey in life. If you never catch on to that, you never get on course. If you get on course and you're not aware of what's going on around you, the frog and the kettle, hello America. If you're not aware that you're being invited to shift your values to something different, then don't be surprised you cuss just as loud as anybody else does if they pull in front of you. Because we've given up the right to defer to other people because our values have shifted. We said, well, that's not important anymore. I want to take us back to a story. And by the way, I can only imagine this movie. This is an incredible story. The song is a story. It's the story of a boy who grew up, and it was painful. It was painful for him growing up, and some of that's in the movie. And at some point, God touches the dad, and the dad begins to turn, and the story is of how difficult it was for the son to have his dad turn, and for him to be able to make the turn as well. And this song, this is a fabulous movie. It is really, it is. So Daniel, here's Daniel. Let me just read you some of this. This is Daniel chapter 1. Let me just kind of read the storyline so we get it. It says, in the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim of Judah, that's the southern tribes. 10 tribes already had trouble. They already abandoned God, carried off captivity. This is now Judah. It says, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. You ever heard any stories about Babylon? It must have been mystically beautiful. We think cultures can be glorious now. No, we're all on a decline. Babylon was incredible. King Babylon came and the Lord delivered Jehoiakim into the king of Judah into his hands, along with some of the articles of the temple of God, carried him off, put him in his own temple. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, the chief of the court officials, to bring in some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, young men without any physical blemish, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. Now wait a minute. He just described a raw bagel imported from Israel. But he's going to have to make it into king's bread. So, you know what you do? There's a man who says, I don't care about how you establish your laws. Let me control your songs and your poetry, and I'll transform the land. If we could go back 100, 200 years, and if we could choose the songs, the poetry, and the movies, the literature that's been written, we could have changed America. And we were there, and we didn't catch on, and we didn't do that, so we are where we are. So,
He had to teach them the language, the literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. By the way, this wasn't tainted food. There's not even an implication it was unhealthy. It was the best of the best that he had to offer, because he wanted these guys to be sharp, wanted to be healthy and wise, and so he wanted to put them on the best diet available. And they were to be trained for 3 years, and after that, they were to enter the king's service. So, among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, as we know them by the Babylonian names, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. Let me say it again. Daniel decided not to defile himself with the king's food and the wine. Just continue just a second here. It says God had caused, can God cause people to have, you have favor in the eyes of people? Well, let me read it again. God caused the official to show favor and sympathy to Daniel. But the official told Daniel, I'm afraid of my king. The king's assigned me to you food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young man your age? The king would have my head because of you. So he didn't want to do that because he's afraid the king would have him for lunch. He says, why would I want to do that? So Daniel then says to this chief official, he says, okay, give us a 10-day trial. Well, 3 years. Why vegetables and water? It wasn't about the food. It was about Daniel saying, I know that I have to draw a line. I'm going to stand with God, and I'm not going to let this old Babylonian gold and glory go to my head, sway my opinion, shape my values in such a way that I'll turn my head away from the things of greatest worth. Now, I'm as patriotic as anybody I know, but I also know that even in the beginning of our country, though we said in America, we hold these truths to be self-evident, we didn't follow them. We didn't follow them. The third Holocaust of America is now the abortion industry, but the first were our black brothers and American Indian brothers. We didn't hold those truths that were self-evident to be true. And I don't know that we've ever gone back and repented of that. And I believe that's one of those lines we're going to have to back up and step back over, because young people today don't know a lot of our history. But if they did, what history would we have told them? And ask it again. A lot of young people today don't know our history. But if they had, what history would we have taught them? I'll give you an example. I've said this before here, but for the 20 years after the Civil War in Fort Bend County, that's where I live, there's 50% black and white leadership in the county. And for 20 years, a group of white supremacist Democrats tried to get in power, because the Republicans and the moderate Democrats all got together, and if there's a good man here, they voted for him. If there's a good man here, they voted for him. Race wasn't an issue. And then 20 years later, there's this Jayhawk Woodpecker War, and officials in the county were forcefully removed, and there started a whites-only Democratic Party in Fort Bend County. And then they passed 2 laws, among others. One was called a pig law. Y'all heard about these feral hogs around, wild hogs? Those guys are good farmers. They would catch a couple, and they domesticate it, and they start raising pigs. But you have to have, by law, you have a license to prove that you bought it. So they go to this farm and say, hey friend, where's your proof of purchase? Where's your title? Where's your license for these pigs? Well, I caught them wild. Sorry. So they put you in a place over here called TDC, Central Prison Unit. Now you're a slave since imperial sugar lost its power when slaves were released, they now contracted with Sugarland Central Prison for prisoners to run the imperial sugar company. They also had hunting laws. You had to have a license for your dog. And if your license was more than you made in a couple months, you didn't buy a license, but you got caught hunting, you went to jail as well. And Fort Bend County became the model for other counties in the state of Texas how to re-enslave freed brothers. If we don't look at our own history as a nation, if we don't look at our own history as an individual, we'll not likely be able to go to the younger generation and say, you know what? We had some values way back when, but we've drifted from those. And I apologize and ask you to consider where we've ended up and warn you of the drift. If nobody sees a drift, nobody warned anybody else of the drift. If we warn of a drift, we also have to take responsibility for it. We have to stand up and be willing to do something different. And so Daniel says, vegetables and water. And all the other buds were getting all the best foods. It wasn't about the food. It was about willing to say, you know, I'm going to stand on what God has revealed to him, of himself to me as the core of my life. It wasn't just Daniel got it, but he did get it. And so the king, a little bit later on, has this dream. And he calls all his magicians and astrologers. He says, okay, man, I had this dream that's really bugging me. So tell me what the dream was and tell me what it means. They said, well, nobody can tell us what the dream is and we'll interpret it. He said, no, you're just buying time. Tell me what the dream was and then interpret it. He said, well, king, no nation has ever heard of anybody who could tell somebody their dream and then you tell us what the dream is. King got mad and he says, okay, you're all dead. And Daniel heard about it. He went to the head honcho, was going to take his head off, and he says, can you give a little time? Gathered his three buddies together and they prayed. He says, oh God, would you show us what the dream means? And God did. So Daniel goes into the king. He says, oh king, he says, God, you are King of Kings. And God has decided to show you what's going to happen in the future. And then he began to unfold this monstrous statue, gold and silver and bronze and iron, and then iron mixed with clay. And then a stone that wasn't shaped by any man's hand comes and smashes the idol, and it just turns to dust and blew away. He said, what that means is this. You, O king, you are amazing. You're the head of gold. But after you is going to come a lesser kingdom. And then a strong, but still lesser. And then iron, and then feet of iron and clay mixed. But this stone, it's going to become a kingdom that will last forever. If you read back through history, you can see Babylon. Told hundreds of years before these nations existed, you can see exactly what happened right up to the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ. Next chapter is the fiery furnace. Remember that one? Whatever put into his head, I don't know. But the king did say, before that, he says, surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries. For you able to reveal the mystery. Then the king placed Daniel in high position and lavished many gifts on him and made him rule over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all his wise men. So Daniel put in a request for what? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego got to be right beneath him. Smart guy. Those are the three guys that end up in the fiery furnace. Because the king stood up a statue and said, everybody bow down at the sound. They wouldn't do it. Called him and said, hey, you don't have the right life. He says, well, okay, if you burn us, you burn us. And if God saves us, he saves us. If he doesn't, we're still not going to bow down to you because they also had decided to draw a line and say, I'm going to determine everything that I do because it's based upon eternal values. Not ones that drift over time, not ones that rise or fall with a nation, but ones that are eternal. And when children today are raised in a school saying, you're just an amorphous piece of tissue, how can a child like that believe there's any eternal worth or dignity in that? They can't. We've allowed them to be robbed of what many of us hold as core down here. I'm an individual. God made me. I have value because I'm a creation of God, and He calls me to be His son. That gives me eternal worth. Doesn't matter what happens to this body or how well it's prospering during the time it's alive. Doesn't make any difference. I'm going to last forever by faith. That's my promise. And it's all anchored because I believe there's a creator God who is the one who reveals right and wrong and the one who watches over those who either prosper or abused. He watches over all of it. And He's close to those who trust in Him. We're going to have to go back and reset our values with the next generation. And that's where it comes to us. Not many years ago, I read research that said children, who are probably, young adults now, trusted their grandparents more than they trusted their parents. Why is that? You have any idea why children trust their grandparents more than their parents?
More consistent, I think.
Consistency, integrity, all those kind of things that were based upon what? Based upon a belief that there are core values that are God-given. And they see that worked out more in their grandparents, in some of them, than their parents. Because a lot of their parents sold their soul to the company store. Went off for the things life could offer, and in some cases, verbally or visually, were willing to take shortcuts to prosper. I'm not being critical of anybody, but I'm trying to paint a realistic picture of the world in which we live that is different today than it was when I was a boy. And I'm afraid that the direction is heading away from that fast enough that it's going to go a ways further before it comes back. And I've told this story before too, but there was a bishop in Northwest Chicago that was quoted as saying, I will likely die in my bed. My successor will likely die in prison. His successor will likely die as a martyr. And that's kind of doomsday. Because he said, number 4, and that is usually quoted, is, and then the church will rise up again, as it has done through history. Because you look at the blackest times in the world. By the way, the Dark Ages weren't quite so dark, or the Age of Enlightenment wasn't quite so bright. Because there were places where the church was still vibrantly alive. Sometimes little communities, sometimes in monasteries and convents, but it was alive. And it gave rebirth years later. In the darkest times of the first 3 centuries, the church grew the fastest. There's missiologists who study missions and the growth of the church. Research seems to say that the early church grew 40% per decade in the first several hundred years of the church. Starting with just a little blip in Jerusalem, taken off to the point even at the end of the first century. It says the servants in the house of Caesar were likely Christians. They're also severely persecuted. And it thrived. And if you look today at a world map of the place that put red dots where the church is most severely persecuted, and then you take a different map, same size, and you put little black dots where most churches are starting and flourishing, and laid on top of the red dots, it'll cover most of them up. Meaning this, where the church today is most persecuted, it's prospering the most. Fox wrote a book of Martyrs saying, the blood of the saints is the seed of the church. I'm not advertising for persecution, in case any of you are wondering. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we believed a lie if we value prosperity over faithfulness. Let me say it again. We've believed a lie of the enemy that prospering is more important than being faithful. Daniel purposed to be faithful. He says, I'm not going to yield to anything that would soften me up. By the way, I heard a man named Ravi Zacharias, who is an Indian person, say that in his culture, they carry a plate of, especially delicacies or foods. If they're going to come to make an apology to you, they'll bring this plate of, they do it in their cultures a lot of ways, but they'll bring a plate and says, so if somebody comes with a nice dish, you start I wonder what they're going to apologize for. He said they do that in other parts of the culture also, but Daniel understood, no, I'm not going to let the king of Babylon soften me up. I'm not going to let him cause me to sway away from, to drift away from what I hold to be most valuable. Let me come back then to the generation that still trusts you in many cases more than they trust their own parents. For those of you who still have a voice in the life of your children and grandchildren, use it. Take the time to sit down in a reasoned way and talk with them about what has happened in our culture and where we're going and what it will take for them to stand. Where it says, when you've done everything to stand, stand firm. That is not as easily done as it is to say it. We need to find people who are willing to hear them and disciple them into believing the eternal values of God will never, ever change. Some things come and go. That's, we all know that. But when any church body has given up on the inspiration of Scripture, we have lost something very, very important. Because what we're saying is we question the list of values set by the value giver. We're not real sure if this is what he said or what he meant. You step across that line, it's hard to get back. If others step across the line, it's hard to argue them back. And a lot of people who are of a very liberal mindset are very, very difficult in their own settings to come to a place of understanding what I'm talking to you about today. Easier to keep from drifting than by yourself to step back across the line without some kind of traumatic involvement in your life. And that happens to some people. Some people do. Something happens, lights come on, they get it, and they step back across the line. And when any of us do, we need to declare it for our own sake. We need to say, you know what? I realize I've been caught up in that. I've told y'all this before, but I'm on a diet. The Lord won't let me cuss at people in traffic anymore. So he put me on a diet of vegetables and water, which means I'm yielding and blessing. I'm struggling with that. I still am. I was coming back somewhere. There was space in front of me, and somebody was coming up fast on this side, and I thought, I felt the urge to get up and keep them from butting in front of me. Stepping back across the line is not always as simple as it sounds, because in our age, so many lines are so blurred for such publicly approved of reasons. And so don't expect at all to get any help from the public sector in there is a crusade on to remove barriers from those who want to be the lawgivers and those who establish values. And that ain't God. But Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar, you're the King of Kings. But God is the only one who can reveal these mysteries. I didn't have it because I'm a smart guy. Daniel admitted that. He says, but there's a God in heaven who is. He's the revealer of mysteries. That's God's deal. And he's decided to tell you what's going to happen for centuries down the road. Wow. And you know what? I don't know whether Nebuchadnezzar published the dream or not. Personal opinion, I don't think he did, because in chapter 3 he sets up the golden statue. I mean, man, I'm the head of gold. Why not a statue of gold? While we're here, let's just give glory to me. I say that because even a good man named Saul, who was made king, started humble. But when he got in a position of power and authority, he set up a monument to himself. I would like to be such a public success that I could qualify for my own monument. I know that. I know that about me. And when the philosopher, who I forgot, Descartes said way long time ago, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Did you know if that's not true? His name is Jesus. There's a story told of a stone being found somewhere in the east. And on it was inscribed the words by the leader of the Roman military in that whole area. He says, I pondered on this truth. There is love and there is power, and no one has both. What was that crazy guy that they finally, he was really abusive, was over in Egypt, Gaddafi? When they caught him, did you ever see pictures or stories of that? He was on his knees begging for mercy. Of course, he didn't get it. Had all the power, but no love. But when he lost the power, he wanted love, but there's nobody there to give it to him. But if you say, nobody has all the power and all the love, nobody has that, he hadn't met Jesus. Because in Jesus, God reveals that he has the power and he has the love. And that is the line on which we all have to live. We can live or die by that, believing that God is the one who has all the power and all of the love. If God were all powerful and not loving, we'd be in trouble, right? If he was just loving and didn't have any power, then we'd still be in trouble. But the God that has revealed himself in the personal work of Jesus is all-powerful. He's God of God, King of kings, Lord of lords. He is also the lover of mankind. And the only one and the only religion who does that is the Christian faith. We need to find our way clear to declare that to our culture. And in particular to those in our culture who will be the ones that carry that message to the next generation when we're no longer here. We need to think downstream and begin to earnestly pray for. You may not know it in particular, but you can pray for the next generation and the next generation, because God said, if my people, not the culture around us, not about the media, it's not about anybody else, it's if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, turn from their wicked ways, seek my face, I'll hear from heaven, I'll forgive their sins, and I will heal their land. I'd say we need that. And I'd like to pray for that. Would you pray with me? Lord, I don't know who all we represent in this room, how many people downstream from us we can touch. Lord, I ask that you birth in our hearts passion to establish your rule in our own lives, and then stir that up as a truth and an anchor, and therefore the highest value in the generations after us, because they will be living when we come home to you. And ask, Lord, that you teach us and teach them to pray, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, with a confidence that you've revealed that as your will, and you're waiting for us to submit ourselves to you in that way, so that you can stir others in the same way. We pray, Lord Jesus, in your name. Amen. Anybody have a party thought? Wow. Yeah, Max, wow. Yeah. We can't leave for other men what God leaves to us. And I don't mean that as an imposition on anybody. I mean that as an invitation to stand up wherever you are and come face to face with God and say, God, what are you saying to me about this? I'm a little embarrassed in a way that I'm catching on to some things I'm catching on at this point in my life. And it's easy for the enemy to work me over and say, you should have known that sooner. No, I don't think so. I am where I am. God meets us where we are, not where we're not. So don't let anybody come under condemnation. You should have done so. You should forget that. He's called the accuser of the brethren. Recognize him for that. And don't let him go any further. It's not about how we failed in the past. That's all covered in the cross. The question is, what are we going to do now? That's the cry of my heart. Yeah. And, by the way, this is such a beautiful story of the potential of changing a heart. The Lord really used a young man to change his father's heart, but then the Lord used his father to change his heart. This is a young Christian singer. And he's holding resentment towards his dad. And he tells me, that ain't good. And this is a story of two generations being healed. I can only imagine. Beautiful movie. The song has touched more people than any other known song in recent history. Yes. I didn't know that. Saw some of the credits.
Triple platinum.
Triple platinum. That means over the hill 3 times, I think, right? Amen.
I have felt strongly interesting your subject is what it is today. But I felt very strongly about the fact that, we're older and we're getting older and why? Why are we here? I mean, why? And we're supposed to be doing something. And a lot of us can't do something. But apparently we can do something because God hadn't called us.
Amen. You know your purpose in life is not done if you're still here.
Yes. So that's been I don't want to say burden, but a thought, a thinking.
I believe that's God stirring it in you, and I believe we're not alone. I believe God's stirring this in the hearts of people all across the nation. Some people are realizing and connecting with each other. God's up to something. By the way, some years ago, there's one of those prophetic guys came to Houston, and some of them I don't know about, but he says, you'll know. By the way, Houston has passed up East and West Coast as a more ethnically diverse nation, city in the country. We're also one of the highest in sex trafficking. Some of that kind of goes together. Okay? He said, you'll know that God is going to, so if God touches Houston, he touches the nations. People are here from every nation. So if he touches us here, there's connections everywhere. He said, you'll know God's going to do something in Houston when you see fire on the water. And several years back, San Jacinto River, when it was flooding, it erupted a gas line under the river, and it broke, and it caught on fire. there, fire, right in the middle of the San Jacinto River. You can take that to mean what you want to be, but for me it says, yes, God is very actively involved in our times. He's not forgotten where we are, and He's not unavailable. And we need to earnestly intercede to God to come and heal hearts, and heal lives, heal families. Most all of my life, my ministry has been involved in reconciling God with people one another. I've ended up being at a church on Sunday mornings when a split went on in the church several times in our area, because I believe other pastors in the area need to care about other churches. I'm not in this game alone. None of us are. We need one another. And any church in the area that succeeds, I'm better off for it. We are. Any church that struggles, we're worse off because of it. We need to pray for each other, encourage each other. I take that to be the Lord's commission on my life as well. Yeah. Well, who brought the popcorn?